Well, shall we look at what the MPs found? It's a new report published today in the Public Accounts Committee that found the government is unable to provide any compelling examples of what Levelling Up has funded and delivered so far.
Just over 10% of the funds provided to reduce inequality under the Levelling Up agenda have actually been spent.
Well, the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddy Gray, joins us, as well as the Political Editor of Tortoise Neilan. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Freddie, they couldn't find an example of where Levelling Up had done what it had promised.
Yes. Dominic Cummings, I think, said from the beginning, Levelling Up is a crap term and it's going to be a crap policy. You know, whatever you think about Dominic Cummings, he's often been quite right about stuff. He was very right about that. It's a classic Westminster bubble phrase that they think, oh, we know. It's like when people talk about flyover country. You know, they're like, oh, there's a world out there and it's not doing well and we need to fix it. So let's divert resources to it. But essentially, let's just make it a slogan for an election campaign and then not really put any actual effort into making it work or thinking about how it could work. And so the money was allocated. You know, it was an important part of the 2019 campaign and did rather well in the Red Wall. And then, of course, it doesn't work. Nothing happens. And this is just another example of this happening with this government.
But the Public Accounts Committee say they can't find any compelling evidence. That's kind of subjective, really.
Well, if you look on... I just looked on the Department of Levelling Up's website, and the only thing they point to is the Network North rail venture, which is a sort of side project that spun out of HS2 being pulled. So it's... I mean, it's clearly something that they made a big part of their agenda, but actually this government's often talking rubbish, and that's why Michael Gove is in charge of this. And it's very interesting that this has come out in this week where Michael Gove is sort of redefining extremism. You know, shouldn't he just be focusing on this, considering it's supposed to be 10 billion that hasn't been spent?
It's going to be one of the challenges that the Conservatives have to pitch to the public to say, we have levelled up, we promised to do this, Boris Johnson did exactly that. The Conservatives had a pretty difficult week. Kat, it's a real pleasure to have you. Your story has, you know, added pressure onto this really, you kind of can't believe how the Conservatives have handled the allegations about the comments Frank Hester made towards Diane Abbott. Just tell us what Tortoise and what you found.
Yeah, so, I mean, as you say, the Conservatives have kind of had a line that has sort of evolved over the course of the week. But one thing that has remained consistent is that they haven't criticised the individual concerned, Frank Hester. They haven't responded to calls for the money to be returned. And they have actually left the door open to receiving more. The Postal Affairs Minister, Kevin Hollinrake, yesterday, I think it was, saying that he would be happy to accept more money. So I heard from Conservative sources that some more money was indeed working its way through the system, and that, as I have put in the article, that in fact the Conservatives are sitting on £5 million. Now, I think the reason why it was conservative figure who came to me with this story is because there is a lot of unhappiness within the party about how this has been handled. The context, of course, being that in these comments, which were first published by The Guardian, as well as saying that Diane Abbott, that the longest serving black female MP that the UK has, made him want to, quote, hate all black women. He also said that he thought she should be shot. And the kind of backdrop to all of this is, of course, this kind of renewed discussion and focus on MP security, which Rishi Sunak has waded in himself, giving that surprise statement outside Downing Street a couple of weeks ago. And I think there is a sort of general unhappiness within the party about how the government and Number 10 has been handling this. You know, initially sending ministers out to say that the comments were wrong, but that they insisted they were not race-based. And it took until Kemi Badenoch, the Trade Secretary, put out a statement saying they were racist for Number 10 to change that line.
Well, Freddie, you agreed with the government's first line. You didn't think that the comments from Ms Hester were racist.
I didn't think they were clearly racist. I think that's what I said. The government said they were clearly racist. I think what I said was that they were said in a meeting 3 years ago, and this was obviously a political hit job. And I do think if Labour think that Frank Hester is such an awful racist, why do they want him to have his money back? I always wonder that. But I mean, this is clearly the story. The Tories have handled this story badly from a comms perspective, and you know, they've managed to get Diane Abbott. Looks like Diane Abbott's coming back into politics. So well played, everyone.
Kat, what is the status of this money? So many questions about what should be done with it. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, so the system that we have is that there is a lag between donations being accepted and them being reported. We have actually multiple different systems, as we found when we did our Westminster Accounts project last year. You have MPs' register of interests, you have ministers' register of interests, and then you have this separate Electoral Commission register, which is updated quarterly. And this is now also under the spotlight because people are suggesting that in this day and age, it is entirely unacceptable to only have that updated quarterly. And I think, you know, if you look at us gearing up for the general election campaign now, and the fact that the Conservatives have raised the spending limit from up to 35 million, you know, there is going to be potentially an awful lot of money flowing into the system that we are not going to be able to see and scrutinise in the run-up to the election campaign. I think there's going to be serious questions asked about whether that's appropriate.
Freddy, what does it say about the Tory party that they were aware of Frank Hester's sense of humour, we'll say, and comments he'd made, and they were still willing to take donations from him regardless?
You'll find that political parties are willing to take millions from people and if they don't think it's going to be a problem. I think it's not that surprising. Donors give money. I mean, I think really the interesting thing is the real story that we should be trying to explore here is not what Frank Hester may or may not have said in some meeting 3 years ago. It's, was there a relationship between the government giving these enormous contracts to Frank Hester's company and his donations? That's really where the scandal probably is. And I think it's very odd that in Britain we fixate on race so much that we end up talking about a throwaway comment that was probably said half jokingly a few years ago. And yet we're not talking about, you know, where there may be a major scandal.
Fair, but we say a few years ago as if in 2019 racism was okay. We're not talking about the 1940s when it was casual racism was accepted by the wider public. 2019, people still didn't think racism was okay. And this Hester has made comments about black people, Asian people. I read some articles saying that he'd made jokes about Jewish people. And I just feel that actually, if the Tory party are going to be okay with taking money from people who generally are bad because they think no one's going to find out about it or it's going to cause them problems, that says a lot about them.
Well, let's not forget, you know, Diane Abbott, who's the centre of this row, was, of course, suspended herself for racism. So, I mean, it's just, I just find we spend a lot of our time in the media talking about racism, which, of course, is a serious thing. Of course, it's a serious problem. But often racism attaches itself to stories that really, you know, shouldn't be
But
about.
that isn't the case in this one, is it? Kat, just final word from you.
I mean, yeah, I don't disagree with Freddy that I think actually the kind of the bigger issue and perhaps where people's attention may go next is on the nature of these contracts. You know, kind of what relationship he had with Rishi Sunak during that period and into now. But I think the race issue is important. I mean, the wider context, you know, as you were just saying there, 2019 is not a million years ago. In fact, it was only 2.5, 3 years after the murder of Joe Cox. And since then, we've also seen the murder of David Amess, a Labour MP and then a Conservative MP, both murdered whilst in the course of their parliamentary business. Now, we have also heard on the back of the sort of debates surrounding the Gaza ceasefire, increasingly sort of threatening language, death threats and so on being issued to MPs. There are increased security levels as a result of this. So, you know, this sort of idle discussion or statement that he believed that Diane Abbott should be shot, I think we do need to take quite seriously. I think it is quite sort of alarming that sort of language has become normalised. And I do think that, you know, Diane Abbott is a particular individual that seems to be on the receiving end of a lot of that. I mean, it is certainly not Now, as Freddy was saying, it is certainly not a one-party issue. There are sort of various different problems across all of the parties, and Diane Abbott is still being investigated for this letter that she wrote, saying that effectively that Jews suffer the same level of prejudice as redheads, which is offensive and completely sort of misunderstands what anti-Semitism is, and so I do think that there is a kind of wider issue there that we kind of need to get to the centre of. But Rishi Sunak has somewhat made this an issue of his own for his own back, because he has raised the salience of it by having that very high profile and completely unnecessary press conference outside Downing Street.
Kat, thank you so much. Kat Neilan from Tortoise, particularly telling us about your latest story, and also Freddy Gray from The Spectator.